This meditation technique is called the yes-no meditation. What we do is we assume a meditative posture. It could be sitting, could be standing, could be lying down, could be riding in a car or an airplane somewhere, could be walking along. There's really no restrictions on when or how we can meditate. Those ones I mentioned are just the most traditional postures and oftentimes the most effective because they tend to help us focus, but don't confine yourself to that thought. So we're in our meditative posture. For this technique, we begin as often we do with a few breaths, right? If possible, try to engage the diaphragm. Draw through the nose and out. And once we've got a few breaths under our belt, we can continue to have some noticing of that breath. The technique is, as we notice thoughts arising, right? Thoughts of any kind, thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, thoughts of an alternate present, random thoughts that come around, instructions, impulses, what about, should I this, should I that, right? Whatever the flavor of the thought, whatever its form, when it comes up, we mouth the word yes. We could say it out loud, right? And a variation of the technique would be to say it silently within ourselves, right? Again, we have three brains in the gut, the heart, and the head. We could say it silently in either one or in all of them at once. We could say it out loud. The technique I like to use for this one is just mouthing it. Right? And so we're sitting there, we're breathing, thoughts are arising, right? We're saying, mouthing, or quietly, silently expressing the word yes each time a thought arises. Now, if your experience is like mine, what you'll find is you tend to get into kind of runaway yes land pretty quickly, in part because thoughts often feed on each other, and especially when they're being encountered with some kind of reaction, thoughts in my experience tend to kind of cluster around that and almost try to like figure out what's going on here, kind of hack it, something like that. And so what this can do is lead to kind of a runaway, I call it like fish mouthing, where my mouth is doing something like this. And what I think this can do is a couple things. One, what I like about the technique is we're using something positive, something accepting, something encouraging in response to a thought, which in meditation, right, even if we try to avoid negative stigmatizing, I think thought tends to be often treated as the boogeyman or the bad thing, the indicator we're not doing it right, the indicator that something's wrong. And so we counteract that a bit by responding to thought with perhaps the most accepting word we have, which is yes, right? Yes. The other thing I think it does is it begins to humble us to the speed and relentlessness of thought, right? Especially when it's engaged. Because, again, if your experience is like mine, the mouth inevitably will really struggle to even keep up with the rate at which thoughts are arising, right? Eventually it's almost kind of like a bag of popcorn in the microwave, right? At first you get a few pops here and there, and then it's kind of like machine gun fire going off. Good luck for the mouth to keep up with it. So in the technique, what you can do is, again, we're doing yes. We may find ourselves kind of fish mouthing into it. Periodically, we can just stop, right? Go back to the breath. Give our mouths a break. Give that part of our mind or our awareness that's noticing the thought and making the connection to yes, right? Give that a break, right? Let them relax. We can actually even pivot into opposite technique and try no for a while. Right, so every time a thought arises, say no out loud, or say no inside. And what you can start to do then is, first of all, that'll give you a little bit of a break and a bit of a contrast. You can also then start to notice patterns in the difference between these two. And no surprise here in my experience, when I tend to use the more positive, accepting approach, the more positive positive and accepting statement, I tend to feel better. Right? It tends to go better. There tends to be less tension. I tend to feel less drained, right? I tend to feel more energy, more flow with things. But that's something you always want to experience for yourself, right? It's easy to say that or to hear that, but what is it for the body and the mind to really experience that? And is it that simple, right? Sometimes perhaps a no, especially to certain type of thoughts, may feel better to us. And so the point here isn't to kind of robotically stick ourselves into one program or another. We're really here to explore, to experience, to experiment, try to develop and cultivate qualities that we think are going to be helpful and healthy to us. And one of them can be this quality of allowing ourselves to alternate, noticing what patterns we see arising, right? Ultimately, I think the technique is going to be anchored back in here, but whatever word you want to use here as kind of your connector to thought, a way to physically represent to your body the fact that a thought is occurring, that works. And then at the end of the meditation technique, right, I like to use my little closer. You commit in the beginning to what technique we're going to use. We practice that technique in good faith during our meditation time, and at the end we ask ourselves a single question. Did I, even once during the meditation period, sync the occurrence of a thought, right, with the expression of a word? And if I did that even once, the meditation is a complete success, and any further consideration is beyond the technique, right? Because again, remember, one of our goals here is we're trying to recognize thought, especially runaway thought, at operation in us. And sometimes what we tend to do is we tend to meditate, right, and hold to that. But then as soon as the meditation's done, I know what I do sometimes, it's almost like I open the lever. It's like, okay, well, let's now think about the meditation that just happened, right? And so this technique, which you commit to in the beginning and then stick to at the end, of just using that very simple evaluation and then congratulating yourselves if you meet that criteria and saying any further consideration is beyond the technique, I think it's a way to carry that same attitude that you cultivate in the meditation into your day-to-day life.